A homeless woman hands a millionaire an old photo. When he sees it, his life turns upside down. Ethan Caldwell stepped out of the grand ballroom, his polished Italian leather shoes clicking against the marble floor as he adjusted the cuffs of his custom-tailored suit. The gala had been another tedious display of wealth, business tycoons sipping champagne, murmuring over multi-million-dollar deals as though the world outside didn't exist. To Ethan, it didn't. The valet rushed to bring his sleek black Rolls-Royce to the entrance, and he barely noticed the woman standing just outside the warm glow of the chandeliers. She was draped in a tattered coat too thin for the bitter New York winter. Her hair, a tangled mess of grey and brown, hung over her face. She clutched a crumpled envelope in trembling hands. As Ethan stepped forward, she took a hesitant step closer. "Sir, please," she whispered, her voice raspy, almost desperate. "This belongs to you." Annoyance flickered in his chest. Another beggar. He reached into his coat pocket, pulling out a crisp $100 bill, but she didn't take it. Instead, she extended the envelope. Ethan frowned, his irritation shifting to mild curiosity. He hesitated, then took the envelope from her frail hands. The paper was old, yellowed at the edges. Something about it felt familiar. A strange tightness gripped his chest as he peeled it open. Inside was a worn photograph, and when he saw what was on it, the world around him stopped. The little boy in the picture was him, no more than 6 years old, laughing in a sunlit field, holding hands with a woman whose face he hadn't seen in decades. His mother. The breath left his lungs. How did this woman have this? His grip tightened on the photo as he turned back to the stranger. "Where did you get this?" His voice was sharp, controlled, but his pulse was anything but. The woman's lips trembled. "I promised her I'd find you." Ethan took a step back, his heart pounding against his ribs. Promised who? His mother was gone. She had been gone for over 30 years. Had she been alive all this time? Had she been looking for him? The woman's next words shattered everything he thought he knew. "She never stopped searching for you, Ethan. But by the time she found you, you were already too powerful to reach." Ethan stood frozen, the icy wind biting through his coat, but the chill inside him was far worse. This had to be some kind of scam. Some cruel joke. His mother hadn't searched for him. She had left him, hadn't she? His voice was steel. "You're lying." The woman shook her head, sorrow deep in her tired eyes. "No, Ethan. She. I don't even know who you are." He cut her off, his chest tight. A flicker of pain crossed her face. "I knew your mother. She never gave up on you." Ethan clenched his jaw. He had spent years erasing his past, hardening himself to survive. He didn't have time for ghosts. "Who are you?" he demanded. The woman hesitated. "My name is Margaret Holloway." "I was," she faltered, her voice cracking. "I was with your mother in her final days." A dull ringing filled Ethan's ears. Final days? He should have walked away. He should have ignored the photograph, gotten into his car, and disappeared into the city. But something inside him refused to let go. "She's dead?" The words felt foreign on his tongue. Margaret's eyes filled with sadness. "Yes." Ethan's grip tightened around the photograph. He felt something rising in his chest, a pressure, a weight, something he didn't want to acknowledge. "She wanted you to know the truth," Margaret said softly, "before she died." The truth? Ethan had lived his whole life believing the truth. His mother abandoned him when he was 6. His father never spoke about her, and Ethan learned quickly that she was a subject better left buried. But now this woman was telling him that everything he believed was wrong. And for the first time in decades, Ethan felt something he had long forgotten: doubt. The limousine pulled up to the towering steel and glass structure that was Caldwell Holdings, the empire Ethan had built from the ground up. He barely noticed the city lights flashing past the tinted windows. The photograph sat on his lap, burning a hole in his thoughts. He had told Margaret to meet him at his office in the morning. He wasn't sure why. Maybe he wanted to prove she was lying. Maybe he just wanted answers. His mind drifted, unbidden, to the last time he had seen his mother. A dim memory, her perfume, warm and floral, the way she tucked him in at night, whispering promises that she would always be there. Then, one morning, she was gone. His father had been cold, unreadable. She left, Ethan. She didn't want us anymore. That was the only explanation he had ever received, and he had believed it. Until now. Ethan rubbed his temples, frustration clawing at his chest. He didn't have time for this. He was a businessman, not some lost child chasing ghosts. But as he stared at the photograph, his mother's eyes staring back at him, he knew one thing for certain. He couldn't ignore this. Not anymore. Morning light streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Caldwell Holdings, casting long shadows across Ethan's sleek office. He sat behind his massive glass desk, hands steepled, the photograph from last night resting before him. He had barely slept. Margaret Holloway was waiting in the lobby. A woman with nothing had managed to shake his entire world in a matter of minutes. He hated that. Ethan exhaled sharply and pressed the intercom button. Send her up. Minutes later, the door opened and Margaret stepped in. She looked even frailer in the daylight, her thin coat doing little to shield her from the cold. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Ethan broke the silence. Talk. Margaret's fingers trembled as she reached into her pocket and pulled out another envelope. Your mother wanted you to have this. Ethan's stomach tightened. He took the envelope but didn't open it. Why now? Why after all these years? Margaret hesitated. Because I didn't find you in time. She waited, Ethan. She waited for you until her last bee breath. A muscle ticked in his jaw. That doesn't make sense. If she was looking for me, why didn't she just... Your father never let her, Margaret cut in, her voice quiet but firm. Ethan stilled. His father. His mind recoiled. No, that wasn't possible. His father had never spoken about her, had barely acknowledged her existence. Margaret took a deep breath. Your mother never abandoned you, Ethan. She was taken from you. His pulse pounded in his ears. For 30 years he had believed one thing, and now, in the span of 12 hours, it was all coming undone. Ethan tore open the envelope. Inside was a handwritten note, faded, fragile, but undeniably real. My Ethan, I don't know if this letter will ever reach you, but if it does, know that I never stopped loving you. I never stopped looking for you. I fought for years, but I was locked out of your world. You were told lies about me. I only hope one day you'll search for the truth. Find Margaret. She knows everything. All my love, Mom. Ethan's fingers tightened around the paper. His breath felt short, sharp. Lies. His entire childhood had been built on lies. His father had told him she left, that she didn't want him. But if that was true, why did this letter exist? Margaret spoke hesitantly. There's more you need to know. Ethan lifted his gaze. Start talking. Margaret swallowed hard. Your mother, she was forced to leave. Your father gave her an ultimatum, either disappear or risk you being taken from her completely. Ethan's jaw clenched. His father had been a ruthless businessman, but this was something else. You're telling me my father forced her out of my life? His voice was low, dangerous. Margaret nodded. He made sure she had no way back in. Ethan's mind raced. He had spent his whole life becoming the man his father molded him to be. Calculated, cold, untouchable. Had his success been built on a lie? He exhaled slowly. Where was she all these years? Margaret's face darkened. That's the part you won't like. Ethan braced himself. Tell me. Margaret's lips pressed together before she finally whispered. Your mother spent years in a psychiatric facility, one your father paid to keep her in. The world around Ethan blurred. His father hadn't just cut her out of their lives, he had locked her away. Ethan stormed into his penthouse later that evening, barely acknowledging the skyline stretching endlessly beyond the glass walls. His mind was a battlefield. His father, Victor Caldwell, had died nearly a decade ago. But the empire he built, the wealth, the power, the untouchable legacy, was still very much alive. And now, Ethan wasn't sure if he wanted to protect it anymore. He paced the room, the letters still clutched in his hand. Everything felt like a lie. His mother hadn't left him. She had been taken, and while she was trapped in some facility, he had been groomed to become his father's heir. He slammed a fist against the marble countertop, his breath ragged. His entire life was built on the ruins of his mother's suffering. And the worst part? He had never questioned it. Ethan wasn't the kind of man who got emotional. He built an empire on logic, power, and strategy. But right now, logic didn't matter. He grabbed his phone and dialed his lawyer. "I need information on an old psychiatric facility," discreetly. "Which one?" Ethan hesitated. Then, in a voice edged with steel, he said the name Margaret had whispered hours ago. St. Augustine Mental Institution. The line was quiet for a moment. Then, understood. Ethan hung up. He had no idea what he would find. But for the first time in his life, he was about to uncover a truth that had been buried for far too long. Ethan Caldwell sat in the back of his car, gripping his phone so tightly his knuckles turned white. The city's skyline blurred outside the window, neon lights reflecting in his dark gaze. The reply from his lawyer had just come in. St. Augustine Mental Institution was shut down 10 years ago. No records, no patient lists, no legal traces. It was as if the place had never existed. Ethan's jaw tightened. Of course, his father didn't just have power, he had control. He had erased his mother from existence, but Ethan had spent his life making the impossible happen. He wasn't about to stop now. He scrolled through his contacts and dialed another number. The voice on the other end was cautious. "Ethan? It's been a while." Ethan didn't waste time. "I need information off the books." A pause. "How deep?" "Deep enough to make old ghosts nervous." There was a chuckle. "You're not usually the type to chase ghosts." Ethan's voice was sharp. "This one belongs to me." The next morning, Ethan stepped into his office, his mind razor-focused. He had barely slept. The investigation into St. Augustine was underway, but something told him this wouldn't be easy. He wasn't wrong. His assistant, Ava, walked in, her expression unusually tense. "Sir, there was a delivery for you this morning." Ethan frowned. "From who?" Ava hesitated. "No sender, just an unmarked envelope." Ethan extended his hand, and she placed it in his palm. It was heavy. He ripped it open, and his blood turned to ice. Inside was a single photograph. A new one. A picture of him and Margaret from last night, outside his office. Someone had been watching, and beneath the photo, scrawled in bold red ink, was a single message. "Stop digging." Ethan's pulse pounded. He had spent his life intimidating people, crushing threats before they could breathe. But now, someone wanted to shut him down. And that meant only one thing. He was getting close. Later that evening, Ethan met with his investigator at a private club. It was a place where people spoke in whispers, where information came with a price. The man slid a thin folder across the table. "That's all I could find on St. Augustine," he murmured. "Your father went to great lengths to cover it up." Ethan opened the file. Inside were scraps of old newspaper articles, fragments of patient lists, but one name stood out. Dr. Leonard Graves, the man who ran St. Augustine. A man who disappeared the same year the institution shut down. Ethan closed the folder. "Where is he now?" The investigator hesitated. "He's dead." Ethan's gut twisted. Car accident, no witnesses, no autopsy report. Too clean, too convenient. Ethan exhaled sharply. "Then who else was involved?" The investigator hesitated. Then, quietly, he pushed forward a second file. Ethan flipped it open. Inside was another name, one he hadn't expected. one that hit too close to home. Thomas Caldwell. His uncle, his father's closest confidant. A man Ethan had trusted, a man still very much alive. Ethan stared at the file, his mind racing. His uncle knew. Thomas Caldwell had been part of it, and if he was still alive, that meant there were still answers to be found. Ethan grabbed his coat. He was done waiting. It was time for a confrontation. Ethan's car came to a smooth stop outside the Caldwell estate, a sprawling mansion his father once owned, now in the hands of his uncle, Thomas Caldwell. The old man was powerful in his own right, a silent force in the business world, operating from the shadows. Ethan had trusted him once, but now he was a man with answers Ethan intended to take. The butler hesitated before opening the heavy oak doors. "Mr. Caldwell is in the study, sir." Ethan didn't wait for an invitation. The study was dimly lit, the scent of aged whiskey lingering in the air. Thomas sat behind his mahogany desk, his silver hair neatly combed, his eyes sharp despite his years. He looked up as Ethan entered, the corner of his mouth twitching into a knowing smile. "Ethan, to what do I owe the pleasure?" Ethan didn't waste time. He dropped the folder onto the desk. "Let's cut the act. You were involved in St. Augustine." Thomas's smile didn't falter. He leaned back, swirling his whiskey. "That was a long time ago." Ethan's fists clenched. No denial. "So it's true," he said. "You helped my father lock my mother away." Thomas exhaled, rubbing his temple. "Ethan, your father did what he thought was best." Ethan's stomach turned. "Best? You call tearing a mother away from her child best?" The older man's gaze hardened. "You don't understand the full story. Then explain it to me." Silence. Then, with a tired sigh, Thomas set his glass down. "Your mother was troubled. She wanted to take you away from this family, away from the empire your father built." Ethan narrowed his eyes. "Because she knew he was a monster." Thomas's jaw tightened. "Because she was going to destroy everything." Ethan scoffed. "So instead of letting her take me, you had her committed." Thomas held his gaze. "Yes." Rage burned through Ethan's veins. "You had no right." Thomas's voice was eerily calm. "You would have been nothing without this family. Do you think you would have built your empire if your mother had taken you away?" Ethan stared at him, his breath coming fast. For years, he had believed he owed everything to his father's teachings, that his success came from the brutal, ruthless mindset he had adopted. But now he wasn't so sure. "Where was she?" Ethan demanded. "Where did she go after the facility shut down?" Thomas's expression darkened. Ethan's gut twisted. "You know, don't you?" A long pause. Then Thomas said something that sent ice through Ethan's veins. "She escaped." Ethan couldn't breathe. His mother escaped? Thomas continued, his voice eerily steady. "Your father thought she was gone for good, but she got out before St. Augustine was shut down, disappeared for years." Ethan's grip on the chair tightened. "Where did she go?" Thomas exhaled. "She was searching for you, Ethan, and when she finally got close..." He hesitated. She was silenced. Ethan's pulse thundered. "Silenced?" He forced his voice to stay level. "Are you telling me someone killed her?" Thomas was silent for a long moment. "Then she died in an accident." Ethan felt sick. First she was locked away, then when she fought to come back, she didn't make it. A bitter laugh escaped him. "And I suppose that was just another coincidence?" Thomas didn't answer, because they both knew the truth. Ethan pushed away from the desk, his whole body shaking with barely controlled fury. His mother had fought for him, had spent years trying to reach him, and in the end, someone made sure she never did. Someone like his uncle. Ethan turned on his heel. "We're not done." Thomas watched him go, a flicker of something unreadable in his gaze. But Ethan no longer cared, because this wasn't over. Not even close. Ethan spent the night in his penthouse, the city lights blinking below him as he stared at the photograph on his desk. His mother had escaped, She had fought her way back to him, and someone had taken her life before she could reach him. The realization sent a sharp, unbearable ache through his chest. He had been told his whole life that she left him, that she didn't want him, and it had all been a lie. His fingers curled into a fist. Whoever was behind this thought they had buried the past. But Ethan wasn't that little boy anymore. He was a man with power, and he was about to burn their world to the ground. The next morning, Ethan's investigator called. "I found something." Ethan gripped the phone. "Talk. You were right. Your mother's death wasn't an accident." Ethan's breath caught. "Whoa!" A pause. Then, a name Ethan hadn't heard in decades. Daniel Mercer. Ethan's world tilted. Daniel Mercer, his father's right-hand man, a man who vanished the same year his mother died. Ethan swallowed the rising fury. "Where is he now?" "That's the problem," the investigator murmured. "No one knows. He's a ghost." Ethan's jaw clenched. Not for long. He grabbed his coat, determination burning in his veins. This wasn't just about the past anymore. It was about justice. And Ethan wasn't going to stop until he found the man who took his mother away from him. Forever. Ethan's car cut through the city streets like a blade, his grip tightening on the wheel. Daniel Mercer, a name he hadn't heard in decades. His father's most trusted enforcer. A man known for making problems disappear. And now, a ghost. Ethan had spent his life learning how to track people, how to find what was buried. Mercer wasn't just missing, he had been erased. But Ethan knew one thing: no one stays hidden forever. His phone buzzed. It was his investigator. "You're not going to like this," the voice came through. Ethan exhaled. "Tell me." A pause. Mercer was last seen in France. Ethan's brows furrowed. "That was 10 years ago." "Right. But before that, he had one last contract." Ethan's grip tightened. "Who?" The investigator hesitated. Then, in a low voice, he said, "Your mother." Ethan sat in his private jet, staring out at the endless expanse of ocean beneath him. The turbulence didn't shake him. Nothing could shake him now. His mother hadn't just died. She had been hunted, and Daniel Mercer was the one who had pulled the trigger. Or, at the very least, he knew who had. Ethan wasn't just chasing a ghost. He was chasing the man who had stolen the last chance he had to know his mother. And when he found him, there would be no mercy. Paris. The city pulsed with life as Ethan stepped off his jet. His contact was waiting for him at a dimly lit cafe, a man with nervous eyes and hands that shook as he slid a file across the table. "Mercer worked for your father until the very end," the man whispered. "When your mother got close to finding you, he was sent to stop her." Ethan's chest constricted. She had been so close. His fingers curled around the file. "Where is he now?" The man swallowed. "He's gone off the grid, but there's one place he might resurface." Ethan leaned forward. The man hesitated, then whispered a name that sent chills down Ethan's spine. The Black Chapel. Ethan had heard the name before. A place where men like Mercer hid when the world wanted them dead. Ethan pushed back from the table. He had a destination. And Mercer had nowhere left to run. The Black Chapel wasn't a church. It was an underground club, a place where dangerous men brokered dangerous deals. Ethan entered through the side alley, his gaze sharp. The air was thick with smoke and tension, and then at the far end of the bar, he saw him, Daniel Mercer. Older, weathered, but unmistakable. Ethan's pulse pounded. This was it. The man who had stolen his mother's life sat there, unaware of the storm about to hit him. Ethan strode forward, and when Mercer finally looked up, their eyes met. For the first time in years, fear flickered across the old assassin's face. Mercer stood up, his chair scraping against the floor. He knew who Ethan was. He knew why he was here. "Long time," Mercer murmured. Ethan didn't blink. "Not long enough." Mercer sighed, rubbing his temples. "You came all this way for answers." Ethan's voice was like ice. I came to find out who took my mother from me. Mercer studied him for a long moment. Then, to Ethan's shock, he let out a bitter laugh. You really don't know, do you? Ethan's jaw clenched. Know what? Mercer exhaled. Your mother wasn't killed because she found you. Ethan's blood ran cold. Mercer leaned in, his voice barely above a whisper. She was killed because she was going to expose something bigger. Ethan's breath caught. This wasn't just about his family. This was about something else, something his father had spent a lifetime protecting, something his mother had died for. Ethan's world tilted, because if Mercer was telling the truth, then this wasn't the end of his search. It was just the beginning. Ethan's heart pounded as he stared at Mercer, the dim lights of the black chapel casting eerie shadows over the man's weathered face. You're saying my mother didn't die because she was looking for me? Ethan's voice was sharp, controlled, barely. Mercer exhaled, his fingers twitching against his whiskey glass. No, she died because of what she found. Ethan's stomach twisted. What did she find? Mercer hesitated. Then he leaned forward, his voice low. Your father wasn't just a businessman, Ethan. He built an empire on secrets, on deals that should have never happened. Ethan's pulse quickened. He had always known his father was ruthless, but this, Mercer continued, your mother wasn't just looking for you, she was gathering evidence, proof that Caldwell Holdings wasn't just in real estate, that it was tied to other things. Ethan narrowed his eyes. Like what? Mercer's jaw clenched. Human trafficking, illegal financial networks, the kind of things that keep men in power at the cost of lives. The room suddenly felt too small, too dark. Ethan's entire empire, his wealth, was this what it was built on? He forced himself to breathe. And my mother? She was going to expose it? Mercer nodded. She got close, too close. Your father gave the order to make sure she never spoke. Ethan's blood turned to ice. His father hadn't just locked her away. He had ordered her death. And the worst part? The man who had carried out that order was sitting right in front of him. Ethan gripped the edge of the table, his mind reeling. You killed her. Mercer didn't flinch. No. Ethan's eyes burned into him. Don't lie to him, Mercer sighed, rubbing his temple. I was sent to do it. But I couldn't. Ethan stilled. What? I let her go. Mercer's voice was heavy, told her to disappear. I even tried to help her. Ethan's breath caught. But it wasn't enough, Mercer continued. She was still found. Someone else finished the job. Ethan's heart pounded. Someone else? His father was already dead. His uncle had helped cover it up. Then who? Mercer leaned in. You want the truth? There's only one person left who knows exactly what happened. Ethan's jaw clenched. Who? Mercer's lips curled into a bitter smile. Thomas Caldwell. Ethan went still. His uncle, the man who had told him just days ago that his mother had died in an accident, had lied to his face, had played him. Ethan pushed back his chair, his mind clear for the first time in days. He wasn't asking for the truth anymore. He was taking it. The Caldwell estate loomed in the darkness, cold and silent. Ethan walked through the doors without knocking. The butler barely had time to react before Ethan's glare froze him in place. Where is he? The butler hesitated. Then, silently, he gestured toward the study. Ethan strode in, his steps echoing through the house. Thomas Caldwell sat by the fireplace, a glass of scotch in hand. His expression remained unreadable as Ethan entered. Ethan, he greeted. I was wondering when you'd come back. Ethan didn't waste time. He threw Mercer's file onto the desk. You lied to me. Thomas glanced at the papers. Did I? Ethan's patience snapped. You told me she died in an accident. Thomas took a slow sip of his drink. I did. Ethan's fists clenched. She was murdered because of what she knew, because of what she was going to expose. Thomas didn't deny it. Instead, He set his drink down, meeting Ethan's gaze. "And now you know." Ethan felt something cold and sharp coil in his chest. "Did you give the order?" he asked, his voice deadly calm. A long silence. Then, "No." Ethan studied him. "But you knew," Thomas exhaled. "I did what was necessary to protect this family." Ethan's breath shook. "By covering up her death?" Thomas leaned forward. "By keeping you from making the same mistake she did." Ethan's vision blurred with rage. "She wasn't the one who made a mistake. You were." Thomas's lips curled into something almost regretful. "And what are you going to do about it?" Ethan's chest rose and fell with slow, measured breaths. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone and pressed record. Thomas Caldwell stared at the phone in Ethan's hand. His voice had been recorded. His confession, his lies, everything. "You won't release that," Thomas said calmly. "It would destroy Caldwell Holdings." Ethan's gaze was steady. "Maybe that's exactly what I want." A flicker of something unreadable crossed Thomas's face. "You'd burn down everything you built?" Ethan exhaled. "No." He stepped forward, his voice like steel. "I'll burn down everything you built." For years, he had carried the Caldwell name like a badge of honor. Now, it felt like poison. His mother had died fighting for the truth. Now, Ethan would finish what she started. The press conference was held in the largest financial district of New York. Ethan stood before the cameras, his expression unreadable. The world had always seen him as the heir to a billion-dollar empire. Now, they were about to see something else. He looked straight into the cameras, and then, in a voice clear and unwavering, he said, "The Caldwell name has been built on lies, and today I'm tearing it down." The room erupted into chaos, but Ethan didn't flinch. Because this wasn't about revenge anymore. This was about justice. And for the first time in his life, Ethan Caldwell wasn't fighting to protect his family's name. He was fighting to bury it. Months passed. Caldwell Holdings was dismantled. The empire his father built? Gone. But Ethan was still standing. For the first time, he was free. Margaret Holloway, the woman who had delivered his mother's message, stood beside him in the quiet of a park. Ethan held the photograph in his hands, his mother's face. Her smile. He exhaled. "She never gave up on me." Margaret nodded. "And you didn't give up on her." Ethan closed his eyes. Then, with a quiet voice, he asked, "What do I do now?" Margaret smiled softly. "That's up to you." Ethan looked out at the world before him. For the first time, his future was his own. And as he walked away, leaving his past behind, only one thought remained. Ethan destroyed the empire his family built, but what will he build next?